Sifu Greg Payne, what is your personal martial arts background?
Well, my background started when I was about 8 years old, back to like, was that 1968, 1969, and I started off in just traditional judo when I was a little kid. Back then, that's what most people started out in, and I think that's a good way for people to start out in the martial arts. It gives you a good grounding on two-point martial arts, but it also shows you throwing all the different aspects of judo in terms of choking, locking, of course, throws and kazushis, and off balancing people. So I thought that was really good. Then I went into Shotokan Karate, and I stayed in that for really the rest of my career until I got older, and I made it to like fifth degree black belt in Shotokan Karate. Studied with people like Shinji Sarata, Philip McRae, which was in New York City, with the famed Philip McRae, which was in New York City, and I had learned a lot from him in terms of cleaning up my style and making that really succinct, and that was a great experience right there. I also studied things like American Kempo. I went to like second degree in that, and presently I'm doing Chinese Kempo. Plus I studied other arts in between, just working with different people also. And in New York City, I also did USA Goju-Ryu with a person named Mac, and he was out of the Fort Apache precinct in the South Bronx, so that was always interesting. And he taught us a lot too in USA Goju USA.
Now, why did you switch from studying American Kempo to IKCA Kempo, taught by Chuck Sullivan and Vic LaRue?
That was very interesting. I had just really just finished working with a guy named Skip in American Kempo, and when I finished completing the system, I always had said, "Wow, this is pretty extensive." You know, I knew that I was a good martial arts enthusiast, but I wasn't sure whether other people would could finish that or really complete it. And I also thought that some of the movements were like quite similar, such as like lone kimono, twin kimono. Those are actually similar movements or what have you. And it's just a little difference in looking at things. So I said, well, you know, Chuck Sullivan and Vic LaRue were two people that were right there with Ed Parker. I mean, Chuck Sullivan being with Ed Parker for a very long time, almost from the very beginning. Vic LaRue, same type of thing, being a student with Chuck Sullivan. And I said, I wonder why these guys are doing what they're doing. So I started studying it. I met a guy named Marty Ryan, and then he introduced me to the IKCA Association in Chinese Kempo, and I just started studying it. But it wasn't an immediate love at first. At first I was just in American Kempo and all of the stuff that I knew and all of the movements that I had, and then I really started working with it and started analyzing the simplicity is complexity, complexity is philosophy, and we just started going from there. And I started really getting into it, and then I met Vic LaRue and Chuck Sullivan at a convention in Long Beach, California, and then I really got into it because they fixed me up and cleaned me up on all of my basics in American Kempo primarily. And then that's when I found out the real essence of what they were trying to do was to really make people have extremely good basics, and to go on from there and to bridge that gap between Kempo and spontaneous motion as the way I saw it in terms of self-defense also.
So you're seeing that the main difference between the IKCA and American Kempo is the spontaneity aspect?
Not so much just spontaneity. I think that American Kempo has great spontaneity, but I think that sometimes people in American Kempo can get confused between, it depends on who's teaching them. If you have an instructor that's teaching you borrow, blending, and combining very well, instead of a person just reacting to the possibility of an individual technique, then of course you have good spontaneity. So it depends on the instructor. But the good thing about IKCA Kempo that's interesting is that everybody's on the same page. So everybody has spontaneity, everybody has borrow, blending, and combining at a high level because everybody's doing the same thing, basically. Now, of course, you have individual interpretations on different things within it, and their own borrow, blending, and combining combinations, right? But you know that you're trying to become as spontaneous as possible from the baseline movements. And you can do it from any technique. It could be Fist of Fury, Crenshaw High Five, Hook Lightning, any one of those techniques. And it's just going to really bring you to a level of spontaneity. And you can move from one to the other with rapid ease and without even thinking about it. It's really a very devastating aspect of American Kempo that Vic and Chuck has developed. It really, I tell a lot of people, if you really want to clean your American Kempo up, or if you're not really sure about your American Kempo, always give Vic a call, study IKCA Kempo, just the orange belt section. I've known guys that were 3rd degree, 4th degree black belts that didn't pass the orange belt test. And the orange belt test was just really on basics. And that goes to show you, depending on who's teaching an individual, whether you truly have your Kempo basics solid or not. Who better to learn it from than 2 people that were at the top of the game while Ed Parker was alive?
So what's your overall experience with your studying with Vic LaRue and Chuck Sullivan?
Once again, just being able to ask questions about Mr. Parker immediately, get really good answers. Oh, and of course, learning a variety of finishes that I didn't get when I was in American Kempo. There are some finishes that Chuck teaches that most people don't get, especially on the East Coast. In terms of finishes, I mean like how endings went, posturing, posing, Chinese poses that Ed Parker had. That a lot of people, even in American Kempo, and I'm on the East Coast, I'm in Maryland, I didn't see do. And they didn't have those type of things. They didn't have as many emphasis on transition of movements and truly emphasizing the transition of stances. A lot of times, now that I look back at it, it was really just a hand being moved and not just the whole body being moved. I'll probably get some feedback on that, but so be it. But that's why I'm posting this out there. With Chuck and Vic, I really learned the concept of stance changes, penetration, torquing, thrusting, raking, grabbing at a really high level, the way that they taught it. A lot of times, for example, if you just get the DVDs from IKCA, that's only maybe 40%. You have to really go ahead and go through the whole program to get the other 60%.
Now, would you recommend others to study IKCA Chinese Kempo as taught by Chuck Sullivan and Vic LaRue?
Oh yes, I thoroughly think that a lot of people, and in fact, a lot of people are starting to study with them and starting to see a little bit differently. Because we had one guy that won the Long Beach Nationals. I think it was last year. I think it was like 2006 or early 2000. Yeah, 2007. Won the Long Beach Nationals middleweight. We have people all over the country winning tournaments, even though that's not really the main emphasis of what we do. But it just goes to show people it's not just quote unquote a video program. You do have a lot of guys that are functioning at a very, very, very high level of Kempo. I mean, we're associated with people in BKF Kempo, which a lot of people on the East Coast are not associated with. So we get to see things from BKF Kempo that most people in American Kempo are not familiar with, such techniques as like check over under, double tapping, and all those type of things in the way that BKF people move. And in fact, Vic LaRue is one of the first people to get a white person to get a black belt from the BKF, which is very interesting. And another fact is interesting is that Chuck Sullivan was the teacher of the then Steve Sanders, which is now Steve Muhammad, and that organization was the winningest karate organization, period. So you get those influences from BKF Kempo, American Kempo, then what we have now is Chinese Kempo, all coming together in a collaboration. And of course, Vic, a lot of people don't know that, has like over, I think by now, over 30 years of JKD experience. So that was always, I forgot who his instructor was, but that's always interesting to see how you can add the traps and into the Kempo also, and how it all blends together. Pretty interesting.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Sifu. Do you have any closing comments?
I just like to say hi to some of the people that back in New York like that, Philip McRae, if they happen to see. I always thank those type of people. People at the Bronx Martial Arts Federation that I was with for a long time when I was living in New York City on Westchester Avenue, on Wheeler Avenue. In fact, if they saw this, they'll know who I am. But I'm in Maryland now, and I like to see some of the guys, and also the late William Oliver. I worked with him for a while also, and he was really a great influence on me and teaching me a lot about karate in and of itself. And I just like the transition where I'm at now with Kempo. It's just really a freeing experience. I'm a lot older now than I used to be, and I'm still doing it. So I started at 8 years old, and I'm 48 now. So it's been a lot of fun.
Thank you, Sifu.
Good time.